I was showing Brother Tony some of the memes that the groups make. IUIC, not African. That's what I Googled. There's all these memes that pop up, which you just referenced, and what they'll show is sort of a disparaging picture of someone who's an African doing something like drinking blood or having urine poured on their head or stretching out their body parts, and they'll say this and be like, we're not them.
That's a horrible argument. The modern day so-called Hebrew Israelite, black Hebrew Israelite, is the largest proponent and perpetuator of Jim Crow. That's the number one proponent of Jim Crow in 2017 is the Hebrew Israelite.
Them and the white nationalists together.
Absolutely. And they probably outnumber the white nationalists. Let's be honest. When Richard Spencer does a march, he's got, what, 30, 40 people?
Right.
You have Hebrew Israelites numbering, at least
they have some of those in every city.
Yeah, so largest perpetuator and proponent of Jim Crow. And the reason I say that is because Africa is not a monolith.
Right. The genetic diversity in Africa is bigger than in any other one landmass than anywhere in the world.
Absolutely. And so to show an image of a Sudanese African, sometimes, man, they don't even show images of Africans. I've seen images where they show what are called the negritos of Asia. These are Indonesian. I'll show you pictures. A lot of the pictures they show are not Africans. These are people from Asia, very dark skin, peppercorn hair. They usually wear like headbands or something, and they come from places like Indonesia, Malaysia. They're the indigenous black people, but they're not African. Genetically, they're actually closer related to Asian people. They'll show people who aren't even in pictures of people who aren't even in Africa, but they're very, very dark. Juxtapose that image against someone, like someone who looks like Chris Brown, who's diluted with a lot of European DNA. But the bottom line is that no one's ever argued that black Americans were taken from Northeast Africa, from the Sudan, from Kenya, from the Maasai tribe.
From the Ivory Coast, by and large,
or
the west coast of Africa, by and large.
They're also not taken from Asia. So why are they showing images of people? But when you look at, for example,
Nigerians, Ghanans, maybe
Cameroonians, absolutely. I'll give you another example. The actor from what's the Star Wars, the new Star Wars?
John. I forget his last name.
Yeah, he plays a stormtrooper guy. He's Nigerian.
Yeah.
There's not this big disparity
between
between him and an African American. He could easily be African American.
Just now, what in this section, what the Hebrewites, I've heard them respond to this before. They're like, "Oh, they're trying to say all black people look the same." That's not what they're saying.
They're saying all Africans look the same.
Yeah, we're saying West Africans look different than East Africans as a general rule.
Yes.
And we're saying if you're going to use these visual arguments, which are kind of based upon phenotype and displays of genetics, if you wouldn't do this with Nigerians and Ghanans with the same success because of the difference.
It's akin to Italians saying, "We're not European. Look at these Swiss people."
Some fair-skinned blonde
Swiss people.
So we're both part Sicilian, just so everyone knows. You got the grandma, I got the grandpa. So most Italian Americans or whatever in the United States are from southern Italy and especially Sicily, because you got hit hardest when they came over here. It'd be like us saying, like, look at these Swiss who would be like fair-skinned, blonde, and like we're not Europeans, because there'd be a difference in the way they would look or appear.
And just like a Slav from Eastern Europe is not the same as an Anglo from Western Europe, East Africans are a completely different people group. In fact, Cushites.
And there's various types of East Africans. There's various types of Kenyans within the nation.
Exactly.
It's really diverse.
It's very diverse. So you have Bantu people, you have Amazi or Berber people of Northern Africa.
Who are fair, the Berbers are.
Yeah, the Berbers. And so it's not a monolith. So these images are disingenuous because they're almost positing Jim Crow ideas about black and white on an entire continent. It's just not the way it works.
Well, this visual theology, this visual way to go, we're just saying is no good. So that's another problem with Hebrew Israelism, is sort of the anti-Africanism and the sort of attempt to argue by cheap visual shots.
Really what it is self-hate. Yeah, they've been so brainwashed by the slave master. That's what it is.
To think Africa is bad.
To think Africa is bad. And it really is sad when you look at pro-black movements in America and you look going back to the Moorish temple. I mean, let's be honest. Okay, the Moors weren't white, but the Moors were Berbers. They were Northern Africans.
You're talking about just so everyone knows, he's talking about the original Moors.
The original
You're not talking
Moorish
about the religious group known as the Moors, but that's another identity jacking.
Yeah, they were jacked the identity of the Moors. the Moorish people from Northern Africa were Berbers. Just like you wouldn't pull from Russians and say, look, these Slavs prove that people in England are somehow connected to the Slavs.
And they've always thought of themselves, of course, different. It's once, like even with Europeans, once they come to America, all of a sudden, after a couple years of, or a couple of generations of integration, now Irish and English and Scottish and Russian, and that's the white people.
Yeah.
But that's not how they would think of themselves over there.
Absolutely.
And especially again when you get to Italians, they never thought of themselves as white. And it's just the point of this conversation is to bring actual a more. We don't claim to be global experts, but a global reality to this really America-centric type of movement.
Yeah, and being married to an African, spending a lot of time with Africans, Africans don't see themselves as a monolith. They see themselves, even within South Africa.
Well, look at what happened in Rwanda.
Absolutely.
It's two tribes.
All right,
that's an example.
Do a little research on the xenophobia in South Africa against Nigerians, where they're murdering Nigerians for stealing their jobs. They're taking our jobs.
Oh, so Nigerians are moving to South Africa? And
Nigerians,
I didn't know that.
And there's horrible footage of horrible atrocities being committed in the streets against Nigerians. Black people against black people. But they don't see themselves as the same people. Right. These are outsiders.
Again, and I think it's very important that, if you mention Rwanda, tell people to understand that's the level we're talking about.
Absolutely. So it is important. I mean, we may not be global experts, but compared to the Hebrew Israelites, we're darn global geniuses.
Let's do this. What about what's the problem with One Westism, Hebrew Israelism, in relationship to their understanding of the diversity or lack diversity of modern day Jewry, and especially as it relates to Israelis? I ask you this, Tony, because you've been to Israel. And you've experienced a variety of types of modern day Jewry, from converts to people who are more mixed, from Sephardic to Ashkenazi to, I don't know if you know any Mizraim, but
I know a lot of Mizraim.
I mean, I think you're the person who kind of introduced me to Mizraim, really. I didn't really know.
You can go to places in Israel like Bat Yam, and it's majority Mizraim.
Can you explain?
Russian. It feels like it anyway, based on what I've seen.
Explain to people the difference between an Ashkenazi versus Mizraim.
So firstly, so when the Jewish people were scattered, when we look at the Jewish people, they were scattered from Israel. What we've learned from the study of genetics is that these men would often intermarry with the women, because the wives might die.
Yeah, it's usually the man with the woman.
Yeah, and the woman would often die en route. And so when these men settled, whether it was in Europe or other Middle Eastern countries,
or even
Africa,
maybe perhaps according to some genetic and oral history in South Africa and Zimbabwe, specifically I'm talking about the Limba as a legitimate possibility of having Semitic roots.
Oh, there's almost, to me it's clear there is.
Yeah, I agree.
Among the men, you find this clear. And same with Ashkenazi. I've heard of Hebrew Israelites, so-called. So they've often said, we have proof. We have these studies that show that the Ashkenazim are not true Jews. Right. And I look at the report and it's like, no, all it's proving is that there's been intermarriage over the years.
Yeah.
But among the men, that's really in any Jewish community, what I'm saying is whether it's in Asia, Africa, Europe, or the Middle East, what you find is that among the men, genetically speaking, there is a tie to the Levant, to the Fertile Crescent.
Yeah. A higher percentage among
clearly
men,
Semitic, much higher, majority.
Also in the as I mentioned, the Limba,
among the Limba, majority of their DNA goes back. As a matter of fact, the Limba and the Ashkenazi and the Mizrahi Jews, they share
key traits.
Yes.
That are distinctly Semitic, basically. And how do you have someone who looks like Jerry Seinfeld and then someone from South Africa actually have these distinct genetic markers? That's amazing.
And particularly among the priestly clans within these people, there is something called the Cohen modal type.
Yeah.
And it's specifically, so you find this, so when they use, even when I've heard Hebrew Israelites use the Limba, that's a horrible example, because all it proves is that Jews come in all colors.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying.
Modern day Jews.
When you go to Israel, the Bible predicted, amazing, because God is always accurate, that he would scatter them for unbelief, but regather them in mercy. So should we be surprised that when they're regathered, after 2,000 years of being scattered from all over the globe, that they'd come back looking Asian, African, European, Middle Eastern, and mixed? So the majority of Israelis, I would say, look like Latinos,
or maybe their Arab cousin, or but
seriously, when you go to Bat Yam, or you go to Tel Aviv in certain areas, or you go even through Jerusalem,
it's not a bunch of Woody Allens running around.
No, it's not. The majority of them are look like Puerto Ricans. You see a lot of black Jews. You see a lot of Ashkenazi Jews. Matter of fact, you've seen the video from my Instagram.
With the IDF women.
With the IDF women, there was probably 40 to 50% of the women there were black in this particular platoon. So it's just, I think it boils down to a need to feel vindicated, a need to get back at Whitey, a need to debase the white man, to put him under your feet, and to play your card. It'd be even one thing if the Hebrew Israelites came and said, there's a possibility based on our understanding, which I think is flawed, of the curses of Deuteronomy 28 that we are Israelites. I think that's fair play. We can look into that. But they had to take it a step further and say, not only that, but we're the true Israelites. And these crackers!
So-called white man, the Edomites, Esau. The pie can't be a certain size. It's like it has to be displaced. It can't be like these people. They
overplay their hand.
Right.
And it just to me it reflects a deep-seated insecurity and a deep-seated bitterness and hatred.
The idea is that there's a search for dignity. There's been a stripping away of dignity, even a search to a certain extent for culture that goes back, and also identity and dignity are key things in any human, especially with these issues we're talking about. And so they think they found it with this story they've told themselves, but it can only be found in Christ, and that's another problem with it.